Rochester City Council. And for anyone that is here from the city of Rochester, I just want to let you know that I am working at a feverish pace, almost hourly, to work on a presentation to provide the city council and the rest of our citizens, because it's become a very important issue that surrounds us on both sides, not only here in Shelby Township across the street from where I live, but also in Rochester Hills. Mr. Grobbel, thank you very much for your time. I should have called you. I would have saved hours on the internet trying to dig up all this information myself. And I will leave you with my questions, unless you want to, Mr. Luke. Okay. Regarding horizontal drilling, can more than one well be drilled from a single location?
Yes, we have as many as 8 permitted in Michigan on the same well pad. Now they haven't been all drilled, and I didn't bring those slides, but yes, there can be multiple wells on the same pad.
Thank you very much. In your experience over the past, say, 10, 15 years, have you run into any occurrences or requests pursued for statutory pooling?
The compulsory pooling is what I like to call it. I don't work on that. I have not worked on that end. I have worked with landowners who've been through that and had attorneys representing them. I do the science part and the expert witness part, but no, I have not personal experience with pooling.
Okay. This is one that I'm researching myself, and I find it to be a very difficult process. If a homeowner does not own their mineral rights, they have their surface rights, but not the mineral rights, and a lease is signed for the property underneath their home, are they notified that a lease has been signed?
Are they notified that a lease has been signed? This is going to be a little bit of a waffling answer, but as I understand it, that's going to be driven by the lease language rather than by the regulations themselves. So typically they're notified. I don't know of any place in state regulations that that requirement exists. If I'm wrong, somebody point that out, but that's a little bit in the weeds, and I don't know of a notification requirement. There really aren't notification requirements in the regulations other than the ones I cited.
I can answer the compulsory pooling question for one.
By all means.
It's an important issue, compulsory pooling, because what happens, very briefly, is that somebody leases their mineral rights, and so that homeowner agrees to have a wellhead in their property. But the regulations stipulate that properties, contiguous properties within 40 acres, I think, 40 acres. Yeah.
Depends on the size of the drilling unit.
Right.
We're going to get into the weeds here.
Yeah, you know, and I'm just, sir, I appreciate it. I just talked to, we're going to get an answer also from the company at the next session.
Okay,
so
but they'll give you one answer. I'm going to give you another. It's so important for the audience.
Sir, I understand it. We got to stick to our format here, or things will go sideways.
Okay.
I'm going to ask the councilman from Rochester to state his questions, and then we're going to answer them and move it along like we set out the rules. Thank you, Bill.
My last question. Regarding in your slide, you spoke to the severance of mineral rights in the property transaction process. Are you, I'm sure you are, could you speak to the Michigan Dormant Minerals Act?
No. I am not an attorney, and whenever I'm asked to play attorney, I don't do that. It's certainly not public.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Jajo?
Good afternoon, Mr. Grobbel. A couple of items here. Now, I was just wondering if there may be a conflict with the MDEQ and the landowner here. Because those properties, he owned an entire block. And he was noted for disregarding ordinances in the past. When he started developing this, well, I'd say over 12 years ago, the land has been set fallow. And now, all of a sudden, they've come up with a well. Now, he bequeathed to the state conservancy part of the land that they were going to use to make a road to be developed between 2 streets on one side of the wetlands and one on the other. The EQ came in there and said, no, you can't do that. It's a wetlands. Now, it is in the state conservancy. Now, is the State Conservancy dealing with the DEQ? Do you think this might be some payback from the DEQ for him to get the mineral rights?
Yeah, my mind doesn't go that deep into the conspiracy theories, but let me say this. I don't know of a state conservancy. There are regional conservancies, but those surface interests, whether they're a conservation easement held by a land trust, held by the township, those kinds of things, as well as your surface rights, are subservient to the mineral rights. So, we do have different types of leases, development leases and non-development leases. If you happen to be in a non-development lease area, but you have leased your minerals, they'll typically directionally drill, like they're doing in Rochester Hills, to get to those minerals from a property that allows them on it, that agrees. So there are ways to directionally drill, but not every surface owner is necessarily then going to be, encumbered by roads and traffic and wellheads, even if they have leased.
Now, second question here. Do you think, with this being an election year, that the politicians might put some pressure on the governor and possibly ask him for an executive order to cease operation?
The time is now. I've only been at this kind of stuff for about 30 years, but I haven't seen people like this turn out since we put the first state Superfund list together. And people found out they had contamination sites in their neighborhoods. That's been over 20 years since there's been this much interest. There's a groundswell. Absolutely well said, and I hope you do that and work with your elected officials to do meaningful change, not just change for the sake of change. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jan. I'm at the 25 Shelby area. My son works on oil wells out west, and I don't have a lot of knowledge, but I have a little. Not only does the company drill the well, but they have to go to another company for different parts for that well, and they turn over the parts that go in that well to this other company. And that is only as good as how good that person is. My son happens to be very good at what he does, but last December, he was working on a well, and part of his process is to be the boss. He takes over. He doesn't work for the well, or the company that drilled the well. He works for a tool company. Part of that is he becomes the boss, and I could tell when he came home at Christmas time that there was something wrong, and I said, what? And he said, if I had not turned around when I did, these two guys from the company would have done something wrong and the whole well would have blown up. So, what I'm wondering is, yes, we know who's drilling the wells, but who are the tool companies and what are their people like that come into their well and put the tools down the hole? And my question is, what kind of water besides chemical contaminants come out? I know in the mountains it's radioactive a lot of times.
Okay. Anybody in the chain of contract working on these well sites has to comply with the rules. The rules are supposed to be, all successors assigned, contractees, subcontractors, blah, blah, blah. I would encourage you to go to the internet and Google. Last year, the Michigan Auditor General did an audit of the Office of Oil, Gas, and Minerals, DEQ, their oversight of this whole program. And you'll find a 27-page scathing report about all the problems. Lack of inspections, lack of follow-up, lack of notification. The system is only as good as our human ability to comply with all these rules, follow through with all the things that need to be done, and the overseers need to be doing their work as well. We have a long way to go for improvement. I don't want to be a downer, but we have a great need for improvement, and I think you all realize that, and one of the reasons why you're here. The water issues, we have, primarily brine that is dealt with. If we are looking at fracking operations, there's flowback frac water, but primarily the typical traditional oil and gas development is brine, and brine management and proper disposal.
John Simon from Big Rapid, Michigan. And I think it's worth noting that I drove in here and I didn't see a single horse in the parking lot. Every single person drove here or rode here. This building is here because of oil and gas development. I think that NIMBYism is a valid observation for this type of crowd. I'll make a couple points, I think, about the presentation because I'll make no mistake. I represent Energy in Depth. It's an advocacy educational group for the oil and gas industry in Michigan. We have people around the country and every state that has oil and gas development. I think what you're hearing is a typical grain of salt magnified into an activist position and a guy that's got a nice little gig going, pushing that agenda.
Sir, in fairness to our process, what we do have going tonight, we announced when the meeting started. We heard this presentation. We ask people now to come forward if they have questions to this speaker, to ask those questions. And next we're going to hear from the oil and gas industry at 8 o'clock. They're going to make their point, get their shot at making their points, and answer questions. So earlier when somebody was critical of the position that's opposite of yours, we asked them to keep it to a question. I ask you please keep it to our format. Do you have a question?
Yeah, my question will go to one of the slides, the well integrity slide, that showed failure rates of 6 and 7% over a 3-year period. Isn't it true that the study those slides were taken from were done by Tony Graffia, who's an activist himself out of Cornell, and isn't the data taken that came up with those statistics offshore wells?
Okay, we have a question, and I think it was from Pennsylvania, if I remember the slide.
The data I reported that you're speaking to was from the Department of Environmental Protection. It's a state agency. There was a slide with Dr. Graffia, and I quoted him. You call him an activist. The university calls him a professor. We can quibble about the titles, but he's obviously not in support of your position, and I'm referencing his good work, peer-reviewed work, as being something that we can learn from.
Thank you.
My name is Clifford Johnson. I live in Rochester Hills, and my question is not about the technicalities of well drilling, but more of the socio-political one. I'll try to keep this as direct as I can. So we have presented here what can I say, the disincentives for anybody who sees the prospect of oil drilling in a high-density residential area. We'll go over that, and it's not surprising, therefore, that folks in places like Shelby, City of Rochester, Scioto, might say, hey, whoa, stop, maybe I'm in an empty field, but not in a high-density area. But here's my question. I'm a Rochester Hills resident, and our city government, the majority of the city council members and the mayor are taking the opposite position, actively advocating for it. I don't get it. You have vast experience in this area. I don't understand what possible motivation would make mayor and city council say, we're hot for this. We want our bedroom community to have wells on it. I don't get it.
Two things. One of the things I tell the communities I work with is don't pass it if you're not going to enforce it. Okay? Number two, I would hope that experiences like this, that there's a good percentage of this audience who's on a planning commission next year and running for office next year and the year after that. You have to replace the people who don't reflect the opinion and the need of the community.
You didn't answer my question. Have you had experience that could give me insight into knowing why would the mayor, why would...
Yes, sir. You know what, he answered the question. We're going to go to the next person, and we're not going to ask no more stand up in line because we won't be able to get to you. We're going to answer the questions with those folks in line and then get to the second half of our presentation. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Christine Bell. I'm a candidate for State Senate, District 8. I'm on the Board of Trustees in Chesterfield Township. I'm a licensed attorney, and I'm here to learn because I don't know enough about drilling, and I figured this was the place to come. And I appreciate the concern that you all have. That you have to be an idiot to think that you should put well drilling equipment in a the residential area. I was glad to see that Mr. Rainberg and Mr. Lund came. I don't know if they're still here or not. I'm curious as to whether either one of them voted yes on this fiasco. And I would like to know what their rationale was. They probably have some interesting stories about how they made their decision.
Well, the fact is, and I appreciate your question, the fact is, the oil and gas industries had this regulation in place since the 1940s. Nothing that's recently happened has caused the issues that we have now. But I appreciate your question, and we'll move on to the next person, please.
Mr. Rubin, I would like to answer that question. I'll be very brief.
All right.
There's been some conjecture in the last 3 weeks about House Bill 4746. Due to the volatility of this whole situation, I think a little revisionist history is in order here. In 2006, House Bill 4398 was enacted. I was a member of the State House then. House Bill 4398 basically gave the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality the power to regulate oil drilling in townships. It passed with unanimous votes, mine included. 4398 was signed into law by Governor Jennifer Granholm. I want to fast forward to House Bill 4746, which was enacted in 2011. First, the Michigan Township Association basically, and I want to say this, the Michigan Township Association is a very effective lobbying firm. If there is one dot out of place, they come to see us quickly. They have no official position on 4746, which basically told most of us that they were okay with the bill. Second, there are 12 city legislators in Macomb County, 3 state senators and 9 state representatives. 10 of us voted for this bill. Now, we, the ones who voted for it, we are for oil drilling in Michigan. But nowhere, and I mean nowhere in this legislation, can it be found that it is permissible or allowable to construct an oil drilling site in any residential neighborhood. I am outraged by that. I said in my opening statement that I think this is a tragedy, and I stand by this, and I'm going to do everything to get this overturned. Third, the one reason we enacted 4746 is because 4398 had no language called very serious consequences, which basically says that if something damages the environment, it is the onus of proof is on the oil drilling company to come in and prove that it did not. Also, too, home values are included in very serious consequences. So this is the reason for my vote. I stand by my vote. And like I said, I'm going to do everything I can, if I'm fortunate enough to be reelected, to get rid of this situation. Thank you very much.
Just to be clear, the elected official mentioned the SILVA test, which was put in the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. And if there are serious consequences shown by a community, they can, through zoning, regulate things like gravel and sand mining, not oil and gas. That was a misstatement. That's wrong. They cannot use the SILVA test on oil and gas.
Very important. It's wrong. Okay. Mrs. Krempa, my next door neighbor.
Yes, I live on Hawthorne with Mr. Hood. I have a question for you, Mr. Grobbel. Have you ever seen an oil well this close to such a highly populated area? I know the rule is 450 feet, but it's pretty close to
Yeah.
many, many houses.
Well, the rule is 300 feet from a fresh water well. That's what the rule is. They could be closer. Now, that's way too close. 456 feet or whatever it is way too close. Shouldn't be anywhere near. If that resource is so precious, they should be directionally drilling from a remote location.
I guess the question is, have you seen
Not in
personal,
Michigan.
not Michigan? So we're the first one you've seen like that.
I would like to take a trip with you all to North Dakota though, and see what's going on.
Yeah. No, I've seen pictures and I don't.
No,
like
that's way too close.
Okay, my next question is, because we do use city water in our area, most of us do not have wells.
Yeah.
What is your experience with people on city water living so close to a
The
well?
groundwater resource is ours, it's protected, whether we choose to drink it or not. We may want to drink it in 50 years. It is completely protected, whether we have our private water wells in the ground or not. And the Part 201, Part 615, and the Michigan Environmental Protection Act all say so. So we have strong law in Michigan protecting groundwater. And whatever resources are dependent on that groundwater typically moves in some direction, typically feeds streams, lakes, creeks, and the aquatic resources that are there are protected as well.
Okay, and lastly, I did drive my car to this meeting tonight, but I'd like to ask you, do you have an oil rig 500 feet from your house?
Sir, absolutely not. I know, I'm telling you, you're not going to shout at the people at the podium. That's our rule. No, she asked a question to the speaker. That's our rule. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Gail. I am from Rochester Hills, and I am from the group don'tdrillthehills.org. Please write that down. We've been working on this for over a year. We've been doing a lot of research. We know this man. I've already seen him before. We work with Auburn Hills. Yes, it actually is. We work with Auburn Hills, Scioto Township, and we actually knew that the permit was coming before you guys did. We just couldn't get the flyers out, and everybody thinks we're just, The DEQ puts the permits on the website about 6 weeks before. We realized that and put out flyers as soon as we saw the permit on the website. It was a request for a permit, so you've got about 6 weeks to fight it. We do have somebody who is looking at the permits every week. So go to don'tdrillthehills.org. We're trying to give you as much information as we can, and we want you to work with us, with all the elected officials. I do have 2 questions.
Before you ask your questions, one thing that reminds me of is if you go to the DEQ website, the Office of Oil, Gas, and Minerals, OGM, you can sign up for an email every week that will be sent to you of current permitting activities. Difficult to read, hard to understand, but you'll at least see the community and the roads and the locations somewhat. I failed to mention that earlier.
Okay, my first question is, how many gallons of oil can be spilled in an area without having to be reported? So when they say they didn't have any accidents or oil spills or the truck didn't leak, how many gallons or barrels?
Okay, there's a reportable quantity in Michigan regulations, and anything less than 42 gallons doesn't have to be reported. Now, I've worked on cleanups where 30 years of small spills have resulted in extraordinarily large problems, including the contamination of 2 drinking water wells. This is a Otsego County case owned by Shell Oil, and those death by 1,000 cuts can certainly occur. They're supposed to notify within 8 hours if they have a spill more than 42 gallons. Why 42? Well, that's an oil drum. Now,
Next question.
Okay, my next question is, there are several homeowners associations that have signed a lease for their commons without getting a vote of the subdivision as required by the bylaws in the subdivision. Is this a valid lease? Would the DEQ accept this lease? Or should the homeowners, is there a way that the homeowners can make the DEQ aware that this is not a valid lease? Because I noticed that on the DEQ website, it says that they will not accept leases that are not valid and signed by all parties.
yeah, thank you for the question. Remember my earlier comment about practicing law without a license? I can't answer that.
Okay, thank you.
Next, Mr. Botcher.
Yeah, Richard Botcher, 5554 Belleville Road. Thank you. I live at 25 Mile Road, not far from Shelby Road. And I'm here tonight to tell you, folks, that it bothers me at night. And I'm further west of the Quinder that's drilling. A couple of things that and I'll get to my question, but here's the thing. Mr. Huth, I was a township supervisor on the board for 12 years, and you and I worked on some environmentally charged issues, mainly the largest toxic dump site in the state of Michigan, at 23 miles to Quinder. We got that done. Now, why are we going to let West Bay excavation get their foot in the door? Why? My question is this: are we going to be looking at the same situation a few years from now, or maybe even sooner? The other problem is, and I realize that the board, where they are, deals with the state, and it's a problem. The state's a big issue. The state government is strong, but in a similar case, in 1999, the federal government in Washington was going to build a postal factory on 23 Mile Road, right at the between Mound Road and Van Dyke on the south side. They had let the contract. Everything was set to go. And you know what? We beat it. So I'm saying to you, be creative. Be creative to, and beat this thing, because residential drilling this close to a residential area is just cause for a catastrophe. That's all. One more thing. I would expect everyone in this group who has a question to be able to ask it. I think that's fair.
Just in response, Mr. Botcher, this township board enacted a moratorium last night. I am meeting tomorrow. There's 2 attorneys in this state that I consider top-notch. Art Siegel, some of you have worked with, we've worked with him before. Jim Olson, the board retained Jim Olson from Traverse City. I think you've worked with them. He's coming down tomorrow. We are going to aggressively respond, as this board is charged, the lawyers to do, and we will be back with regulation that will make sense. Yes, though, I know you have a question.
I'm Rebecca Sawicki. I live in Stonewick South, off of between Mound and DeQuinder, 26 Mile. We're very fortunate to have an expert scientist who is independent from West Bay here tonight. I'm a big believer in science, actually, and so I have some questions that hopefully you can answer. I would like to know, where I live, I am going to be in the close proximity to where it is rumored or anticipated that the production facility, or the processing facility will be for this well. I would like to know some things. Primarily, how many wells can feed into one processing facility? Typically when one well goes up, can we anticipate that they will try to drill in an area adjacent to all of those wells so that they can feed multiple wells into the same processing facility? And what are the logistical implications and the real-life effects to those of us that live in that area as far as the construction, installation, and maintenance of the pipelines? The main utility easement pipeline area is along our walking paths, our bike paths, places where our children frequent. Are they going to be at risk when they walk down these paths that connect up beautiful neighborhoods?
Okay,
Honey, we'll get all the questions out because we have to keep it moving. So go ahead, Mrs. Wicki.
And my very last question is, as an expert witness, is it your opinion, and I know you're not a lawyer, but is it your opinion based on the science that you have available to you, if you were to be retained as an expert witness in a situation where litigation occurs, do you feel that there is a preponderance of scientific evidence and reasoning as to why it is not appropriate or safe to have wells this close, 457 feet from residences? Do you feel that you could stand in a courtroom and make a really concrete scientific foundation and basis for reasons why this should not happen? Because our concern is, going forward, there may not be any new wells, but do we even have a chance in demonstrating and proving that that well that's already there needs to be closed, it needs to be taken down, it needs to be gone?
Okay, thank you. All right, there's 3 questions.
In answer to the last question, and from what I understand of the circumstance and permit application in this case, yes, mistakes were made. It's too close, sensitive resources, waterways, endangered species, all kinds of things were part of this decision-making process. And done so in a slipshod, facile manner. I think that there have been violations. A comprehensive environmental assessment should have been done. Now, is that done routinely? No. Is that something that is going to be done routinely in the future? Well, that's exactly what the SIO folks have sued over, to make sure that that happens. Now, I haven't done the work. I would like to do the analysis, so I can't answer yes or no in that circumstance. I haven't even seen it. But from reading the information I have seen, yeah, I think there are certainly issues there.
2 other questions. What do we expect from the pipeline?
Flow lines, what we've seen with West Bay and Jackson, Calhoun counties where we've done the research, meaning the litigation team in SIO, is that new wells relatively quickly follow, 5, 6, 7 wells relatively quickly. A central processing facility will be going in at that point. There can be, as many wells connected to it as it can handle. Those flow lines have to be put in the ground from each of those oil wells to the processing facility. And what's typically done is either at a processing facility or other, centralized location, flaring. Where does the gas go? All of this is driven by economics. The price of oil is high, over $100 a barrel last time I checked. The price of natural gas is relatively low. We've saturated the market by fracking all over the nation, right? So they're interested in the oil. They're going to burn off the gas almost always in this part of Michigan and waste it. That then causes a flare to be installed at some point. The upsets at flares, nuisance odors at flares have been well recorded, well established, and are a problem, and probably one of the biggest sources of concern for the neighbors, including the dust, noise, traffic, and the like. And in the event that there's a spill, the rapid cleanup of that spill and control of it so it doesn't migrate.
Okay, thank you.
What about the safety? I did ask a question, it wasn't answered. I asked about the safety of traversing. If the pipelines were to go in recreational areas where they're frequented by residents, are they at any risk?
I think there's a risk involved in everything in life. The risk of that is relatively confined, relatively low. However, it's a great opportunity for the township to assert control, to require a franchise agreement, a consent to use public lands and public right-of-ways by a private company. They don't just automatically have that right. And you can put a great deal of leverage on them if they propose to use those areas for flow lines.
Okay, and I saw somebody else just get up. We have 4 more persons in this segment, so I don't want you to stand up there and not get your question asked. But you're not going to get your question asked this time. 4 more people. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Gail Blazinski. I'm at 11050 Timberline. And I came to this meeting, I think like most people, we want to know what can we do. I hear a lot about the particulars, a lot about the science of what's going on. But I'm not an attorney and I am not an expert. I'm just your hardworking man, an everyday person, and I need to know what can I do. Can I sign a petition? Can I lobby? Can I picket? Of course, none of us want this in our backyards. We don't want this in our neighbor's yard. I'm not clear if my neighbor owns the mineral rights to her property. Do I have to put up with her lease behind my back that she may have an oil well? I mean, is that really what we're dealing with here? But bottom line, I still don't have a clear understanding about what can I do here in Shelby and the surrounding communities to stop this.
I began with and ended with that answer, what you can do. And there are a number of options. But in general, organize, get involved, organize with your community, and support your township, who's actually, taking a stand here. Most communities are spending an awful amount of time just trying to get their officials up to speed and to do anything. Your officials are already at the table. Support them and work with them.
Your officials are at the table, support them and work with them. I'm going to pass the microphone on if his is not working. 3 more people are going to ask questions. We're going to take a quick break and then hear from West Bay. Yes, ma'am.
I'm from, I'm kind of nervous, but I'm from Parkway Court here in Shelby. Most of my questions have been recently answered, and I appreciate it. I'd like to hire both of you myself, but the thing that I have a question about is I know you both keep talking about our representatives, township. I don't understand why Rick, I don't know, I should know his last name because I used to work in a company where he did, but it's hard for me to pronounce how you say his last name. Right, you got it. I wanted to know why. We all want to know why we didn't know about this, but apparently there was a letter sent or a survey sent regarding a 2011 change that was made to the EPA or whatever it was. But I'm going to get that in my notes here.
If you, I understand your question. If you have, I'll answer that one. If you have another one,
Well,
I know
what I wanted to, you know what I was going to ask? Yes. A letter was sent to Rick, and he said he knew nothing about it, but a letter was sent to him to respond if he felt there was any problem with this going into Shelby area, and he didn't respond to it. My question is, how can we depend on our representatives if they don't respond to something as important as this?
Well, the fact of the matter is the township did receive notice in May of this past year, and it received notice in July. The township officially are talking about, Rich Stathik has talked to me. I referred to him to state law where I believe we didn't have a role in this. Having to do it all over, I would have given different advice, absolutely. I will say, MDEQ has said, didn't matter what you folks did in Shelby, we've never turned down an application where it's come in and all the things are in order. That's not good enough for you. We understand that. The township board acted last night to do a couple of things, and one of them is to give you the information as soon as it comes in regarding any of these things. We are also asking the MDEQ for information they wouldn't typically give us. So you should have had information. If we would have spun back the clock, I would have given different advice. We're up to speed now and in front of this. And going forward, I think you're going to find our township as a leader in getting our arms around this industry so that we can make sure there's responsibility in all of our backyards. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Susan Duchek. I live in Creekside Village in Rochester, and actually I'm on the side that's right where the well is at. I can see it when I walk my dog down the path. And my question really is for when Senator Brandenburg got up, and I applaud him for urging passage of the bill in September. And my question is, if this bill is to pass, would it be retroactively be able to stop any more drilling of the well, and or if they've already started producing any oil or gas, would it be over and they just would keep going?
Okay, thank you for your questions. I'm going to ask Senator Brandenburg to respond, please. He's going to respond, if you don't mind, ma'am.
Thanks again. Thanks for the FaceTime. I appreciate it. If we tailor this legislation specifically for Shelby Township, and we can get it through the legislature, then we can make it retroactive. Now, there's a flip side to that coin. Getting it through the legislature without someone trying to piggyback onto the legislation is going to be a very delicate task. I'll do my best.
Thank you.
You got my guarantee. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
And Representative Pete Lund will do his best. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Kristen Clickwhite. I live on DeQuinder Road in Rochester Hills, and I live directly across the street from where the well is. I am on well water, as are my neighbors, and I think we're probably the closest drinking water wells to the well. My question is, what is the state and what are West Bay obligated to do to protect my drinking well? If those protections are adequate, what can I do to protect my well? And if the state is the overseer of where these drilling wells go, why did I not get notice prior to this going in so I could have taken proactive steps?
Well, there are no requirements that they notify you, unfortunately. The company is not supposed to spill any hazardous material onto the ground. There are cleanup standards well established, modified periodically by the state of Michigan as to what contaminant at what level in residential drinking water. With things like benzene, 5 parts per billion, very low levels, are harmful to human health and therefore unlawful. They are not under any obligation to monitor your well. I would suggest that you do a baseline environmental study of it, have a reputable laboratory sample it now, and record confidentially the water quality, and also have them check the water level in your well today and file that away as a baseline, before and after. That kind of thing, some labs are charging a couple $1,000s to do around Michigan. My group's been doing it for $300, $325 around the state for folks. So shop it around.
Thank you very much. Now folks, we're going to take a 5-minute break.